Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
In 1956, 66% of Americans said newspapers were fair to both major political parties, including 78% of Republicans. Today, just 28% of Americans say they have at least a fair amount of confidence that the mass media reports the news fully, accurately, and fairly. And the partisan split is stunning. 51% of Democrats and just 8% of Republicans. So, what happened? A lot happened. Too much to cover in one video. But this is about the beginning. And it all started with the invention of the myth that is the liberal news media. A brilliant and destructive political strategy. A strategy Republicans perfected so well that it led to a conservative media ecosystem big enough to create a false shared reality for tens of millions in the US alone. In the past, Republicans have referred to this strategy as working the ref, because it's the same basic principle as athletes complaining that referees are biased. The mainstream media in this analogy would be the refs, and the Republican Party would be the players flopping on every play, claiming the ref is helping the other team. This liberal news media myth didn't catch on with voters until the late 80s, when Ronald Reagan's FCC put an end to the fairness doctrine, paved the way for alternative media that was finally free to spread lies without the fear of losing their broadcast license. However, historians note that the beginning of this insidious political strategy started with two men in September of 1964 in the back of a 727 Boeing jet in St. Louis, Missouri. This is that story. For more videos that explain politics today using history and data, please subscribe and leave a like. On September 10th, 1964, Barry Goldwater's campaign jet lands for a stop in St. Louis, Missouri. On this stop, Goldwater has a surprise for the 50 or so journalists who travel with him as part of his press pool. Goldwater is nothing like the Republican presidential candidates of the previous 3 decades. He is not a liberal, not a moderate, he's not a Rockefeller Republican, he's not economically progressive like Eisenhower or even Nixon. Goldwater is a different kind of Republican. Goldwater is a conservative, and he's being backed and celebrated by wealthy conservative donors who see him as the man who will finally roll back the New Deal era. The most important of Goldwater's backers is Richard Mellon Scaife, heir to the massive Mellon fortune. It's Scaife who gifts Goldwater his 727 jet and travels with him on the campaign, utterly inspired by the conservative candidate. This is Scaife's first direct venture into politics, and long after Goldwater's star fades, Scaife would use his wealth and power to become one of the most consequential creators of the new conservative Republican Party. Goldwater's policy agenda is the kind of thing that thrilled Scaife and other movement conservatives, but alarmed much of the country. His agenda included scaling back Social Security, opposing Medicare, voting against the Civil Rights Act, and pushing a hyper-aggressive nuclear policy. The Lyndon Johnson campaign capitalized on Goldwater's nuclear hawkishness with one of the most effective campaign ads in history.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes.
And here's the key. By September 10th, Goldwater isn't just unpopular, he's heading toward a historic, embarrassing blowout defeat. He sees it every day in the polls. Goldwater's team needs a story that explains the polls without admitting the obvious. That the platform is deeply unpopular with a still New Deal America. And that his self-described extremism is at the very least making people uncomfortable, if not terrified. So Goldwater, Scaife, and campaign manager Denison Kitchell take a strategy from the Jim Crow South. You see, in the Deep South, the local television stations did whatever they could to censor national coverage of the civil rights movement. They would either do this by cutting away from the news or by prefacing national news with local disclaimers, saying the following story was part of an agenda from the Northern liberal press, and encourage viewers to tune in to the local news so that the Southern news team could counterpoint the national broadcast. The local news team convinced viewers that any positive stories about the civil rights movement or negative stories about segregation were false and part of Northern liberal propaganda. Goldwater took this strategy and expanded it to include not just segregation, but all conservative ideology. We're not losing because our ideas are unpopular. We're losing because the media is against us. And not just one paper, not one reporter, not one editor. The entire mainstream press. This is the pivot. This is the invention. On that September day in 1964, after landing in St. Louis, Missouri, on the back of the plane where the traveling press pool sits, Goldwater personally hands out gold lapel pins and asks reporters to wear them. The pins read, Eastern Liberal Press. And it's not just a prank, it's a message. A line is being drawn. You are not neutral observers. You are a political enemy. Historians have noted this moment because for the first time, a Republican presidential nominee has cast the press as an institution as liberal and hostile, not merely critical, not merely unfair, but ideologically aligned against conservatism. And to be clear, politicians have always complained about the press. That part isn't new. What's new is the scale of the accusation. Goldwater isn't saying, this columnist hates me. He's saying the whole system is rigged against an entire political ideology. It pressures journalists psychologically to provide favorable coverage. They bend over backward to prove they're not liberal. They give conservative grievances extra weight. They both side things that aren't symmetrical. And over time, an actual bias does develop in favor of a false right-wing narrative. That's working the ref. Goldwater's campaign went down in flames, but Richard Mellon Scaife was just getting started. He became a top aide in Richard Nixon's campaign, and then went on to fund the newly established conservative think tanks of the mid-70s that would create the new Republican Party. The myth of the liberal news media was a major part of the overall strategy. And the detrimental long-term effects of this strategy have come to fruition. A modern right-wing media empire that can set the agenda, enforce party discipline, and define reality for its audience. Barry Goldwater did not invent partisan media, but in 1964, he helps popularize a powerful new Republican narrative that mainstream journalism itself is the enemy of conservatism. And once that narrative takes root, it becomes self-reinforcing. Because every correction, every fact check, every negative story can be treated as proof of the original accusation. So when you look at the Gallup poll number, 28% trust overall and 8% among Republicans, don't think people suddenly noticed bias. Think about 60 years of political messaging training people to distrust the referee. Because if you can convince your voters the ref is crooked, you never have to admit you lost a game. If you want more videos breaking down how American politics actually works, please subscribe.